right, hi everyone. Welcome to the Trail Talk Highpointing podcast. Our guests today are Tom Shea and Tommy Burns, the co-editors of the Highpointers magazine Apex to Zenith, and also the very first guest I ever had on this podcast back when it was a 50 States Highpointing podcast. So Tom and Tommy, thanks for being here. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the latest Highpointers convention. We'll talk about the latest issue of Apex to Zenith magazine, and then we'll talk about some of their most recent high points. So, Tom and Tommy, again, thanks for being here. And why don't we go over some convention highlights? What were your favorite parts of this year's convention, and what do you want people to know?
It was a fun convention.
Yeah.
It was a really fun convention. We were at the Unicoi Lodge, right next to Helen, Georgia. So Brasstown Bald was the high point of choice and location. And there was a great turnout. We were very excited about the number of people who were there. Lots and lots of energy. You know, I think we've got like a whole new emerging group of high pointers, which, you know, from Tommy and my perspective, is one of our big goals with Apex to Zenith. And what we're trying to do is get a lot of enthusiasm and excitement and sort of bring a whole new group of people in. And, you know, Tommy, what do you think? I think the convention sort of highlighted that's happening.
Yeah, definitely. It was our second convention, right? So for us, it was definitely, it was different in a way. We knew faces, you know, but there was a lot we didn't know. So, but maybe we're a little bit high profile now with the magazine. So it was interesting and fun to talk to everybody from all around the country, and just we wanted to hear their input of what we could do for the magazine. But as far as the convention itself, I thought it was something where, you know, back home, you don't talk to people for too long. It's always quick conversations. It's a quick text. It's those types of things. When everyone kind of goes to one spot, and you all have similar interests, and you can get knowledge from each other for what you're doing. It was great. You're having long conversations about things that interest you. I was telling Tom on the ride home, I'm like, everybody I met there, I'll never have a negative conversation with for the rest of my life, right? It's all positive. It's all good. You know, there's nothing there that's going to be negative for me ever, right? And it was just fun to talk to everybody. And just, you know, normal day life, everything goes ups and downs and those types of things. But I was talking to a beekeeper from Virginia, you know, and we just hiked Virginia. And I felt like I was in his backyard when he was talking. And
well, Tommy is he is amazing in terms of just his general interaction with people in that kind of a setting. Right, so you've got 130 people. It's a convention, and it seems like every single time that I look over, Tommy is in the middle of some highly animated conversation with somebody about something. And in this case, it was beekeeping, and I think there were a number of other. I think they were talking feral ponies with somebody and longhorn bulls with somebody else. So
yeah, that's right.
It was a really interesting, great group.
Yeah.
You know, I think one thing that sort of highlights where we're getting a lot of new enthusiasm and energy is there was an election. So at every convention, we end up having an election for the new board of directors and for the key officer positions. And typically what's happened for the course of, you know, probably the last 4 or 5 years is there haven't been enough people who have been involved and have been nominated or nominated themselves. So it was sort of like, if you were on the roster, you were in.
Yeah.
This go around, we actually had 10 people in the mix for 5 open slots. So there was a lot of energy around, you know, people wanting to get involved. I will just highlight who the 5 new board members are.
Please.
So Tom Martin, who has been with the club for many, many years, was reelected back to the board. Shelley Messenger, and we can talk a little bit about Shelley, because Tommy and I met Shelley last year at the first convention that we went to, and we were all brand new to the club.
Yeah.
And now she was elected to the board as well.
Cool.
Scott Brumand, who is Shannon's dad, and avid Highpointer, mountaineer, you know, really sort of interesting background. And he's somebody that we've got to get onto podcast at some point.
Yeah,
Catherine-
and for the listeners, who don't know, Shannon was on episode 26, and she did mention, when I asked her how she got into high pointing, that it was really a family event at first, and she mentioned her dad. So I was going to ask, when I heard the last name, I thought, is that Shannon's dad? So that's cool.
Yeah, and I think in one of the earlier podcasts, Tommy and I talked about meeting Shannon and her dad and her brother at
That's
that
right.
very first convention, and that's sort of how we got involved in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Catherine Bertine, really, really fascinating background, very interesting in terms of she is a cyclist. She's sort of an avid athlete and also is very, very involved in high pointing.
Yeah.
And fifth, humbly, I was also nominated. And elected
Congratulations. Yeah.
So excited about that. But then the other thing that's really exciting is Shannon was elected president.
Yes.
So first female president ever of the Highpointer Club. So just a lot of kind of enthusiasm, energy, excitement, and I think, big things to come as we all move forward.
And so in this most recent issue of Apex to Zenith, there were short bios of each candidate. And what I loved the most was reading through everyone's background, because while they're all very diverse, everyone obviously has high pointing in common, but then they do all these other adventures in life. And I thought, wow, what a great thing to bring to the club. Everyone has so many different talents. Like you said, there's a cyclist, Shannon's a doctor, and you have people that have done all of these amazing high points nationally and internationally. And it's just, I can't wait to see, based on new leadership, where the club goes. I'm really excited.
Yeah, it is. When you're talking to people at the convention and just, it's like listening to James Spader in The Blacklist go on one of his rants about where he's traveled to Morocco to buy this or that. Everything is like, well, I was hiking this trail and it's just, it's unbelievable. At the beginning, the first two sentences of conversations, I'm listening to people and I'm like, I got to get out there more. I got to keep going. I know.
I found that right in the beginning, right when we started to reach out to people to schedule meetings and get to talk to them and meet them and stuff. It seemed like every single person was like, "Oh, well, I'm doing the Pacific Coast Trail now, so I'll be back in a month."
I get that all the time when.
Right? Yeah, I'm sure you find that when you're trying to
schedule a quick call and talk to somebody.
That's how I feel too. I mean, I'm 7 months pregnant, so really, the extent of my outdoor adventure is limited at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think, talking to people that are actively involved in achieving their outdoor goals, it's so good for me just to hear, because I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to get back out and do this stuff. And I just love hearing people that are so busy in life doing that. And it's hard sometimes when I'm trying to schedule a podcast and they're like, no, I'm going to be off in Africa climbing this peak. I'm like, cool.
Can you do it remotely via satellite, maybe?
Yeah, right.
With respect to everybody involved, it's like you're talking to people, they're normal people. I'm like, this is all doable? I mean, you did that? That's great. He's like, well, I didn't do it all. Of course, I didn't bring my gun. And I'm like, yeah, of course. I'm like, do I have a gun? I'm like, wait a minute.
Right.
It's great.
Jenny, it's one of, our podcaster of the quarter.
That's right, Jenny.
Apex to Zenith.
Oh, yeah.
Her story is fascinating, right? I mean, her story, nothing stops
Yeah.
her, and she just gets out there and gets it done.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and that's why she was a great pick for the High Pointer of the Quarter. And for the listeners who are also High Pointers Club members, you'll see in the next issue that comes out, the next High Pointers of the Quarter. So they're all podcasters, so that's what you can look forward to, and they're all High Pointers Club members. So in this latest edition of Apex to Zenith, Ginny from episode 10 was our High Pointer of the Quarter. And of course, she's overcome so many things in life, being a type 1 diabetic, and she's still she's on her way to being a 50-state High Pointer completer.
Yeah. And what I think that does too, Lauren, and we've talked about this a couple of times, but it starts to show how our collaboration with you and the integration of kind of different channels of information, right? So you're doing the podcast, you're talking to so many people, you're coming across really interesting stories, we're then talking, those become people that we highlight in the magazine, and vice versa. There have been people that we've been interacting with, like Robin, for example, and Shannon
Yes.
from the
Yeah.
Highpointer Club. It's like, look, Scott, now it's like, these are great people who would be awesome for you to interview. So
Right.
it's just sort of a good give and take.
Yeah,
Right.
it's we have a position on the platforms that we control to put these stories out, and I think that's almost a responsibility when you come across these stories of people doing fascinating things.
Yeah.
You got to get that story out,
Right.
And
Right.
you guys are writers. I'm a YouTuber.
But let me throw a plug out for all of us here is really the only way that we know about a lot of these things is by people telling us and people
Exactly.
letting us know the cool, exciting things they're doing. And there are some things, there's a lot of social media stuff. There's a, 50 state Highpointer Facebook page. There's the Highpointer Club Facebook page. There's an Instagram page. But what I would really love people to do is to just connect with us directly, right?
Exactly.
I mean, if people can just send emails directly, and I know you put them in the show notes at the end, but if people can send things to us, it's much more likely that we'll be able to communicate the story and get them in the magazine and get them on the podcast and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, getting back to the convention, that's also another place to meet people who are doing fascinating things. So can you talk about some of the stories or the people that you encountered, the new people at the convention who are doing some great things on Highpoints?
P. Burns, you're up.
Well, when you said new people, as far as great things on Highpoints, I mean Ray Neighbors. We met Ray. I think I met him Friday, and he was there alone. And obviously, a lot of people go alone. But he's from California, and he had just started Highpointing. I think he had 5, right? And just started talking to him, and we hung out for a couple days. And he's now going to help the convention team in California because he's from California. We tried to get him to host it, but we couldn't quite do that. But when we met Ray, it was just. He started out 2 years ago, and I'll let him tell his story, but because I think it's an important one to tell. But he was at a maybe like a local TED Talk type thing, supporting a friend who was going to be making a presentation.
Okay.
And before that, he had heard a Highpointer get up there, and he was standing there, and the Highpointer started talking in an inspirational type of way, and he said that he thought he was talking directly to him. And he said, I have to do that. And then this was 2 years ago. And I said, wow, that's wild. I'm like, this is kind of like, because we just kind of came up with it on our own, and our story isn't as inspirational, but it's something that got us moving. And Ray kind of said, he sat on it for a few years, maybe it was COVID or something like that, but he flew out to Alabama for work. And he had just done the same 3 that we had just done. It was Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. So he bundled and clustered those 3 together. So we were like, no way, we just did that. So we were talking about that and how he did it. And I thought he's like, I'm coming back. He was so fired up about just who he met. He didn't know what to expect and those types of things. So that's somebody who only has 5, and he was really a big piece of, my weekend. And I think Tom's and Robin's and Billy's and everyone was and Justin, whoever was by the fire late night on Saturday or early Sunday morning,
Yes. People who survived the late night campfire.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
bonded forever.
And he stepped up. He's helping out, right? He's gonna an upcoming convention. He's gonna anybody who kind of gets involved and opens himself up to it and kind of can laugh at themselves, not the situation, and be vulnerable at what you know and don't know. You're really connected. So I think that was happening. But I think as far as what else, Tom, was there, we can.
Well, look, and I think Ray, he's a perfect example, right? He only had 5 under his belt. He just said, what the hell, I'm just going to go do this. And came out, and we had a great time, and he was awesome. We also had somebody who, and I'll get into this a little bit when we talk about Mount Rogers and our Virginia High Point adventure. But while we were climbing, we met somebody who was not a member of the High Point Club, really had never known anything about the High Point Club. Jen, fascinating, was a pharmacist, but was so inspired. In fact, she's somebody else that we should get on a podcast because she now is leaving that profession and becoming a park ranger because she's so into the national parks and, is sort of an avid outdoors woman. But we met her, we hiked with her, told her about the convention, and she was like, you know what, I think I'm going to go to the convention. And based on the logistics of her travel, now remember, we were in Virginia at this point, she was able to coordinate so that she came to Georgia, came to the convention for a day. I hope had a great time. You know, it was a lot of fun. But I think it's a lot of those kinds of situations where, you know, it's almost like the Highpointer Club is the best kept secret for Highpointers a lot of times.
Yeah.
So the more that we're able to communicate it and get people involved in it, the better.
Right. So there were a lot of different stories that people were telling. I think it was, one was Liars Club, right? And then one was just a Friday night social, Confessions of a Highpointer, I think he called it. So I'll protect the guilty and I won't get into any specifics of any of the stories, but that was pretty cool. You know, so just hearing people stand up there in front of 130 people who nobody knows how to public speak and just tell their story and laugh at themselves and what they confronted along the way and maybe get inspiration a little bit too. I think for just, you know, for all of us who are out there just kind of walking in the woods, it's something can make people uncomfortable. But I think as the drinks were flowing, we were able to lubricate the discourse and have a good time. But I think that, you know, I don't remember a lot of specific things in there, just pieces of each one.
Okay.
But those were, everybody who got up there was not a 50 completer or a 48 completer. There were some, and they would lend some specifics to it. I just thought it was a good blend of everybody participating, really, with their stories, and a lot more resonated this year to me. Or maybe I was listening more. I wasn't as overwhelmed in the second year. That I just kind of was sitting back going, wow, this is a pretty amazing group of people. But when you look at it,
everybody's able to connect with some element of people's stories, whether it was I did that high point, or I ran into that thing you're talking about, or your situation, or your region, or whatever it was.
I will say this. If you're going to go, if there's any high pointers out there who are thinking of going to the next couple conventions, right? We got South Dakota coming up.
Yes.
And then we have California.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Everything that we can talk about, we've talked about what's great about it. You know, Billy Urbanski tells the Sherlock Holmes joke Saturday night. And if you just come for that joke and walk out and go home,
it's worth the price of admission.
It's worth everything. It is just, I think Billy, he's taken over the joke from, you know, I don't know if it's one person or two. I think he filled in last year. I didn't really remember what was going on, but when he told the Sherlock Holmes joke this year, with respect to everyone who's told it before, he tells it pretty good, and it's an amazing experience. So go for the Sherlock Holmes jokes, and everything else is just gravy. So
let's put it this way: he told the joke. I then tried to repeat the joke at home to utter failure. So the way that he told it,
he's still telling the joke.
But that's the point. Telling that.
I think
exactly.
Like the 10 horse event in Saratoga yesterday.
And just to put a point on something Tommy just said, one of the big things that we do at every convention is we vote to determine where the next conventions are going to be.
Yep.
Right.
And because of COVID, the schedule got a little bit off, so we had next year's already set, which is in South Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
What we didn't have, just due to some, you know, changes around ownership of it, was we didn't have the definitive leader, and we were very fortunate that we had somebody step up to take over and to run San Diego. So that is happening, which is awesome. I think South Dakota is going to be phenomenal next year. And, you know, there's a lot of people very focused on it, and there's just a lot of things being put in the works now. So we certainly, as soon as we know anything, we will highlight it in Apex to Zenith and through all of the club social media channels.
Perfect.
Then the vote for the next year was it's always a fun, big, interesting affair. And California ended up being our winner for the next year. So 2025 will be in California.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be so exciting.
Yeah.
My plan for the South Dakota convention is to turn it into, we're obviously going to go to the convention, but then also visit the national parks around the Dakotas. So Teddy Roosevelt National Park, Wind Cave National Park, and the Badlands. And hopefully see some wild bison, obviously do the high points. And then the California one, want to go up to Mammoth Lakes after the convention.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And also, I was remiss. It's Mark Stasinski who is going to be leading the South Dakota
Okay.
convention.
Okay.
Okay. So I wanted to.
That's awesome.
make sure
And
I get
for the
Mark's
listeners,
out.
yeah, for the listeners who don't already follow the High Pointers Club on social media, you can find them on Facebook and Instagram. And they've recently become very active on the platform, giving away a lot of very relevant information. I've been really enjoying those updates.
Shout out to Justin Sutton, who is
Yes.
really taking the lead on that. And that's
Yep.
all by design. That's all. One of the things we talked about is we want to be much more, sort of have a much more vocal presence out there.
Yeah.
And provide helpful information for people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
Justin
exactly
was a
what it
member
is.
of the club for over a decade, I think, Tom. I mean,
Yeah.
and he's awesome. I mean, he's just heart of gold. I mean, from Biloxi, Mississippi, and doing it for all the right reasons. The tone of everything he's doing is really great. And,
Yeah.
you know, he was one of the, you know, someone who was involved when we came onto the magazine who just wanted to still be involved, right? And he's been great for us. And I think for something, for what we're doing, we'll talk a little bit about our last travels, but, you know, we were in Florida, right? We could have ended our trip in Florida. We flew in, we did Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and then we said, like, hey, Justin just lives right over here in Biloxi. Let's go see him.
That's right.
You know, and,
We were exhausted after doing the Florida High Point. But we
Yeah,
still
it was-
decided-
I was,
No
we were
one ever.
sore. Yeah, we were sore. We were having epiphanies on the beach, but you know, but no, we
That
said,
actually, Tommy, that's one of the things that we consciously said that, you
Yeah.
know, look, your travels as a high pointer take you everywhere.
Yeah.
And so when we have the opportunity to meet other people, and this is probably a good transition into our Virginia High Point, one of the, you know, sort of big highlights of our Virginia High Point experience and follow-up was we got to meet Lauren face to face.
That's right. In
Right.
Chapel Hill. Yep.
Yeah, so we were
Yeah,
like,
that
hey,
was
you know
fun.
what? 'Cause you recently made the North Carolina move. We're like,
Correct.
how close are you? We were going to try to do this podcast live in studio, but logistics just didn't work out. But yeah, that was awesome. It was great seeing
That
you.
was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. So, yeah, for the listeners who don't know, I was not able to go to the convention just due to some pregnancy issues and going to see a doctor at that time.
Yep.
But I was able to meet up with Tom and Tommy in Chapel Hill, and that was such an awesome little surprise. And just so you know, they are exactly the same off camera.
for better or worse, I guess.
that's good. Real recognize real, I guess. But no, yeah, I think I'd
Yes.
forget who I was if I wasn't the same person all the time. I think. There's enough to
Well,
do.
and that's when you guys were able to tell me about Mount Rogers, which when I ask a lot of guests on the show, what's your favorite, your most memorable high point? A lot of people do say Mount Rogers. Obviously, the ponies are a big deal, but then you're on the AT the whole time, or most of the time. And the Grayson Highlands are just beautiful. And apart from that, you met some fellow High Pointers Club members and podcast guests from
Yes.
episode 23, Austin and Nicole. Can you tell us how you realized that you were both on the podcast?
This was just an awesome sort of connection of things together in some weird and sort of universal way. Because what happened was I told you that we had met Jen and we were hiking with
That's right.
Jen, right? So she was our pharmacist friend. We were talking about, so Tommy and I have an Instagram, We Summit the USA.
Yes.
And on that, what we do is we highlight what we're doing with each of the different high points. So on our last trip, we ended up going to Muscle Shoals, the music production studio, awesome time. And we were talking about that with Jen. And as we were talking about it, a couple with their two very cool little dogs were just crossing by. We were going up, they were coming down. The word Muscle Shoals came out in the conversation. They took 2 steps and the guy turned around and he's like, Muscle Shoals. He goes, are you Tom and Tommy? from the Highpointer Club? And we were just like, oh my God, like what is happening here?
Right.
We're like, yeah, like how would you even know that? And he said, I read your thing about Muscle Shoals, and I don't think a lot of people are out here talking about Muscle Shoals.
Right.
We're going to the convention, and we just started talking, and it was Austin and Nicole. So the connection between the convention and your podcast and, all of this stuff sort of converged in a really cool way.
Yeah.
I love those stories. And, I'm sorry, I'll probably edit this out. But I had a guest on a couple weeks ago, Tim Warren. He was like episode 31 or something. And he had climbed Everest. And he met another one of the guests that I had on episode 30, who was a guide on Mount Rainier. And he was doing a sponsored summit up Everest from Coleman, the outdoor brand. And they met each other on the peak. And then they were later on my podcast. And then Tim goes, I met that guy from episode 30 on Everest. I'm like, oh my God, this is such a
small... on Mount Everest, right? It's that amazing. It really is. Yeah. It shows you how huge but tiny this is, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's everywhere, but it's this small group of people.
Yeah, I mean, we were walking by. I mean, we are just before you get to the top where you go into the forest. I guess what we're calling the forest, the top of
the Enchanted Forest.
The Enchanted Forest. They're coming out, and hey, what's going on? Always cordial. He walked by us a good 5-10 steps. Like he walked by a couple steps, and you could tell he stopped and went, "Hey, wait a minute, are you guys Tom and Tommy?" And I was just like, how is this happening? Where am I? Who are you? And like, yes, we are. Yeah, come on over. Let's talk for a while. But,
and we talked for a while, but then to even carry it to the next level, they then came to the convention. And I have to give a shout out, Alpine and Cheyenne are their awesome dogs who climb everywhere with them.
That's
and
right.
Travel everywhere with them.
Yeah, they've got those dogs have a couple high points under their belts. Or their collars.
Yeah. So
but we get to the convention. We're hanging with them at the convention and talking, and it turns out that Nicole is much more savvy in the world of social media than any of us are. And so, long story short, she's now helping us with the social media approach for the Highpointer Club.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
We had a Zoom call yesterday with Nicole and Justin, and so it's all sort of converging in a really good way.
But Muscle Shoals, it's just it's crazy to me that I remember talking about Jason Isbell before on the first podcast. Who would I want to hike with and those types of things. And he's an Americana artist and someone who means a lot to me. And that's where he grew up. He grew up in Muscle Shoals, but the studio was also the home of the Swampers, right?
Yes.
Sweet Home, Alabama. Muscle Shoals has the Swampers, and I wanted to go there so bad, and we were driving. We were driving through Mississippi, right, and heading over there, and we take our time doing things. We have a schedule, but the in between is whatever happens, we're going with it, which is a different kind of travel. I think my sister, his wife, and my wife are always kind of like, well, what are you doing in between? And we have to, we just leave it open.
Let you know when we're home.
It's just a different way to travel. But so we kind of took our time with we won't get into that right now, but it was closed. Muscle Shoals studio was not open. You check it, they're closed. They close at 5. We can't get there. Hey, we'll just swing by, no problem. And or maybe not swing by. Right? Should we go? Should we not go? And it's like we went by, and it ended up being almost a life changer. Right? The way we got in there and we talked to them and really spent a few hours in that studio because there was a North Alabama reunion going on. They rented it out and they let us come in. So without the hospitality,
honorary alum now of Alabama University.
When you're on the road far from home and you have nowhere to go, you go to see if it is closed. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Right.
If I was around here, I'd be like, no, they're closed. Let's go somewhere else. We'll get there in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
So we went there and it was incredible, and it turned into a great post from Tom, and we met them. Like if we laid on a rock, I think, for a half hour. Right, looking at the mountain range. If we didn't do that, I don't know. It's just
That's when we met Jen. When we were looking at
her there and the timing of it.
It was a beautiful spot, though. Yeah, it was a gorgeous day.
If we didn't stop at Muscle Shoals, it wouldn't have been in that post, and we just kind of when you're out there doing.
Look. So for this particular high point, I think we would share what other people have told you. that it really became one of our favorites.
Yeah.
Because you had told us about the feral ponies, and the first thing that we saw when we got there at the trailhead are feral ponies running around.
Yeah.
And we're like, all right, this is going to be awesome. But then we're climbing up further, and we hit a point where we just have to walk further up the trail, and we look in front of us, and there is literally a gigantic longhorn bull standing in the spot that we should be walking. And so this is where Tommy and I are like,
Hey, it's just
how dedicated and committed are we?
well, we were
right
scaling
there.
rocks. Right, we were climbing rocks, and then we were coming down, and as we came down and looked, there was a longhorn bull right there. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, minding its
So
own
we did
business.
sort of scoot around, and he was
I'm like,
very docile and quiet. It was
it was beautiful. What I liked about it was, I think it's definitely my favorite now. I mean, I'd never been to Virginia, like, ever. Like having.
But then the other thing, if you remember, Tommy. Now here's the deal: when you get to the top, the views on the way up are gorgeous, beautiful mountains. Then you do hit, we call it the Enchanted Forest, but you kind of hit a forest where, as you're looking around, it's beautiful, but you're not really seeing gigantic, gorgeous views. But then when we got to the very top, there was a young family, Heidi, Shane, and their 1-year-old, or I think 1-year-old, little guy, Luke, who I think it was his first high point.
Wow.
And he's wearing a Highpointer hat.
Oh my gosh.
So we're like, are you guys going to the convention? And they're like, no, we can't go this year, but we want to. So we had a nice conversation with them for a little bit. So really, this particular high point was awesome for all of these reasons, right? It was beautiful. It was a gorgeous day. We met a ton of really cool people. So it was a blast.
I think a lot of trails up northeast here, or New Hampshire, I kind of go a lot, is tree covered, right? And
that's right.
This was wide open the whole way, wide open. Like, and it was just a lot different experience visually. You could see everything. You could see a little further. It wasn't that strenuous, right? It was longer than maybe. It's always longer than the people who pause all trails to just get the right time.
You're mentioning this.
Like, I can't even. We don't pause it. We hit start. We go to the top. We go to the bottom. That's it. Everybody I found out pauses it when they stop, so we're always off a little bit on our time, or maybe we're slow, or both. But anyway, we enjoy the whole thing, and having
and as we've said, look, we always try to bundle as much stuff as we can. And I think one thing that we're starting to do, for better or worse too, is we've normally tried to bundle stuff that were like right in that area, but now I think we've expanded the area out a little bit. Because Virginia and Chapel Hill are not that close.
They're not.
They're a little bit of a haul. But what was happening there was, if anybody's watched Welcome to Wrexham, it's a Ryan Reynolds, Rob McElhenney. I guess it's sort of a reality show. It's a documentary. They purchased a soccer team in Wales, which is just a whole awesome story. I highly recommend that people watch it. I think it's on Hulu. But in any event, they came to the United States and they were playing Chelsea, the Premier League English team, in Chapel Hill. So Tommy and I said, let's go do it. And I think the one highlight of that story, the game, it was a tough game, but it was fun. But the highlight there was we walked into Sutton's, which is sort of a Chapel Hill landmark that we've been to for many. We've been there many, many times.
Our pictures hanging in the rafters there. I mean,
yes, my daughter Julianne went to school there, so we spent a lot of time there. But when we walk in, Tommy and I and Steven, our good friend down there, were having breakfast, and we looked over, and for those people who have seen Wrexham, Wayne Jones, who is the Turf Hotel, the Turf Pub owner, who is very prevalent in the documentary, and his cousin, Jack, are just sitting there ordering breakfast.
Yeah.
So, of course, shy as we are, we walked over, we introduced ourselves, we're talking, and they were awesome. They were absolutely great. The best possible ambassadors for Wrexham than you could have in the United States. Yeah. After about 20 minutes, a whole crew of Wrexham supporters came in. And so we spent a good half hour, 45 minutes just hanging with them, talking. So it was really, really fun. It was great.
Yeah, and then we all went to Sutton's that afternoon that I was out in Chapel Hill. right before the game?
We went to Top of the Hill.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
The Top of the Hill. So
I'll edit that out. I thought
it's more of like a little, used to be a pharmacy. It's sort of like the key place where all of the athletes go. It's now
Okay.
like a lunch, breakfast place.
Yeah.
Okay.
We took you to the Top of the Hill.
Yeah, come on.
Oh, okay. All right.
All different places. But that was fun too, right? And that's where our
Yeah, that
friends
was awesome. That was cool.
set up the nice little spot sort of overlooking Franklin.
I know. Gosh, we were spoiled.
Yeah.
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 But it's
Yeah, so it was fun.
Tom, great
Yeah.
segue there. That was unbelievable. But yeah, so our original plan was drive down to the convention, we'll figure out which high point to get that we haven't got, and it ended up being Virginia, which made the most sense, and we'll go to the convention. And it ended up being, we're going to do Virginia. Now we're going to go to Chapel Hill to watch Wrexham play Chelsea. We're going to do a live podcast with you, and then we're going to go to the convention. Because you just moved out there 40 minutes from where we were going.
Right.
And that all happened, like, that's just what's going on right now in our life. And it's pretty exciting, and I love that, right?
I know.
As we're looking at a map, we're like, all right, Virginia's, well, I don't know, North Carolina's not that far.
Yeah.
So we'll just make that trip down.
But if you moved 6 months earlier, or 6 months later, it all worked out that week, right? It
You're
was
right.
all right there for us.
You're right. No, that was awesome. And
It was
and
good.
so good to see you guys, especially because I wasn't able to go to the convention.
Yeah.
I did, though, do Brasstown Bald on our way from Arizona to North Carolina. We hit a couple high points. And so
Awesome.
so I did get to see Helen and the Unicoi Lodge and Brasstown Bald, and it's all super beautiful. I just unfortunately couldn't be there with the rest of the High Pointers, but definitely
How cool was Helen? With like,
Oh, I loved it.
Helen's like a little Bavarian town.
Yeah, and I was telling Tommy earlier, you just don't expect it. And the way that I found out about Helen, Georgia was my husband and I hiked up Brasstown Bald, and then we were just Googling pet-friendly hotels near Brasstown Bald. And the only one available was in Helen, Georgia. And it was like a motel, and we're just like, all right, let's try it out. It's the only one available. Because we brought our fat little dog, carried her up the high point. And so we get to this motel, and it's really pretty. It's along the Chattahoochee River in the middle of Helen, Georgia, in this little Bavarian village where there's like German polka music playing on speakers in the middle of the street. And
Windmill.
yeah, windmills everywhere. I mean, it's just such a cute town. It's a fun town, and would love to go back around Christmas time.
It would be beautiful. Yeah, it would be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband wants to go back for Oktoberfest. I'm like, that's too wild. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great, right? And then from there we rolled. Did we do anything else? As though that wasn't enough. Oh, I know. We
went to Betty's
went
Country
to
Store 4 times.
The coolest. What was it called, Tommy? The coolest town, the coolest hometown in America.
Oh, no, yeah. So when we went to Virginia, we stayed in Marion, Virginia.
Right.
Right? And, the marketing there is America's coolest town. And it was pretty, I guess it was cool.
We didn't know if it was self-proclaimed or.
Oh, I think it was before Google, you could say anything about anybody. No one could check. But
But it was very cool.
it was cool. And,
It was cool.
So
And we met Morgan. Morgan was awesome. Morgan was at the little. What was the name of that little breakfast place we went to?
Pioneer.
Pioneer, downtown Pioneer restaurant. And Morgan was awesome. We were just chatting, talking with her, and so that was fun. That was that's another town like Helen that I sort of noted on the list that it would be fun to go back to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just again, we found it by accident. I think the hotel was reasonable and close because you had to go down the mountain road, but it was just the fact that Marion, Virginia exists makes me happy. Like
Right.
you could go there, and it's just exactly what it should be in the middle of Virginia. So it was incredible.
And in another transition here, those are the kinds of things that we want to highlight more and more in Apex to Zenith.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because-
So I'll show the most recent cover. This is it.
There it is. And that is Lucy Westlake. That's actually another update for everybody. So Lucy, if you note on the cover, was just before her attempt on K2. And that K2 story really became a fascinating, scary, interesting story. which we will update in future issues. And if people have been following social media, we've been trying to update it. Because Lucy is a Highpointer from the time she was really young, little kid,
Yep.
sort of grew up being outside, being in the mountains with her family, and through the Highpointers Club, and then took it to levels that, most of us can just look at and be amazed by. So
Yeah, she's incredible, and she'll be on the podcast in the future. She's a
Yes.
50-state completer, the youngest American to summit Everest, and then this
Correct.
season she did attempt K2. I don't want
Yes.
to give anything away.
yeah, I mean, there's that. We'll let her tell her story.
Exactly.
And what we want to do is we want her to tell it, in Apex to Zenith, which, in hopefully this next one. She's also kind of an elite track athlete at University
Yeah.
of Southern California, so she's heading back to school for. She's got a lot going on in her life.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. No, I'm looking forward to that. And this issue was really exciting. This is your second issue as co-editors. And I think my favorite part of the issue was the photo contest, because there are amazing photographers out there. And you don't even have to have a photography background or a fancy camera. There are just people who stand in beautiful places and hand their phone off to someone and say, take a picture. And it just happens to be the perfect time of day.
Yes.
The perfect, lighting, setting, whatever. And these pictures are incredible. And then there's little stories. And you just see how many regular people there are out
Right.
doing this stuff. And then they submit them to you guys
Yeah.
through the newsletter at, what's the email? Sorry.
So it's newsletter. I always have to make sure I don't give people the wrong address, right? So it is newsletter at highpointers.org.
Yes. And that's in all the show notes for YouTube and in every YouTube video and podcast. You can find that. And that's how you can submit your photos. If you
Yes.
stood on a high point or on the trail along the way to a high point and you have a good photo, send it to
Right.
Tom and Tommy and maybe tell a little story along the way. And
Yeah, and
see
what
if
I
it
would
appears.
ask people to do is this, there are unbelievably awesome photos on Facebook, on Instagram, people, that's where they go, which is awesome. We
Yeah.
are not in a position, nor do, our extensive staff of Tommy and I don't have the ability to go through and pull out cool pictures and go to people and check out who was in it and so forth. So what we really would ask people to do is, if you took the really awesome shot, just send it to us at that email and just tell us who's in the photo, whatever. Obviously, if you've got an interesting story, definitely tell that. But at minimum, just tell us the names of the people who are in the photo.
Yeah.
A lot of people like to take pictures of their kids. If you send your kids, give us their ages, right?
Yeah.
So, and if you have number of high points you've completed, if you let us know that as well, it'll make it much more likely that we're able to put your photos into the magazine.
Yeah. And then there was another couple pages about 48, 49 completers and
Yes.
just people out there doing great things. And it was such a great issue. Of course, Lucy on the cover is featured in the magazine. And then the high pointer of the quarter is in there. That's Ginny from episode 10.
That's right. That's right. And so our upcoming one is going to be the summer issue. It's we're working on it actively right now, so it'll be out sometime beginning of September, and we are going to have a big update on the convention. We're going to give some highlights on the upcoming conventions. We'll give a little bit of information around some of the leadership changes and the direction and kind of where we're taking things.
Yep.
And probably most importantly, we just want to tell as many high pointer stories as we can and, highlight the awesome things people are doing. And I think one of the shifts we're going to try to take a little bit toward is just more helpful, meaningful pro tips, things to do, places to go. When you're out there high pointing, what are some of the things outside of the actual high point that would be fun and cool to do?
I think that was the most common theme that we were asking people, hey, what'd you like about it? What don't you like? We want to hear all the feedback, right? We're just a vessel for everybody here, right? This will be around when we're done with it. So we just want to take care of it. And everybody said, what do you do around the high points? Those types of things. Which ones do you do together? What are people doing when they go there? You know, so we want to put that. We definitely want to put that in there. That was everybody said that when we asked, what do you think for content, and had some ideas. Obviously, there are things that have been there in there forever. The 48, 49, 50 completers. That's going to always be there. Right. There's going to be things that are in there every quarter, and those are going to stay. And maybe we'll pull back, go back. We got some. We're reading some past editions as well to try to figure out, you know, what was this before and what should it be now, and really blend all of it together. But yeah, that's going to be fun, putting those things together and getting the feedback from everybody of where people went, where they stayed, where they went. We all look at Atlas Obscura, and I'm not a big fan of that, right? But it's a little too much now. But if we can do our own version of, like, you know, where to go from people who've been there recently, you know, and if you can find it specifically, you don't have to Google it. It's a whole vast world out there. We want to be able to share the information with everybody that everyone's gathering.
Good.
So
it's important to be a resource. You know, when you have a platform, I try to do the same thing on the podcast. You know, if there's any tips that people have for others, I always say, like, what do you want people to know about what what organization you're from, or you know, what high points that you've done. Why not? You know, why not just help each other out?
Share the wealth, right?
Yeah.
Open it up.
So our next ones.
Yes. What are the next high points?
In the works, right? Well, what do we have? We have 3 East Coast. We've definitely got South Dakota.
Well, I'm doing. You have New Hampshire already,
right?
I don't. So
okay.
We're doing. My wife turns 50, Melanie, on August 28th. So on her birthday, we're doing Mount Washington.
Awesome. Awesome. I hope the weather works out.
Well,
right. Don't wear your flip flops.
We're going that day. You know, I hope so too. But so that's going to be awesome. So that'll be that's my next one. I think we'll probably not do one before that, and then we'll
be good. Now. Then we've got Maine, Vermont, and I don't know. We should have done it before, but stuck in the middle is West Virginia, which we were sort of all around it, but logistics just didn't let us get there.
Yeah.
But we definitely, you know, this fall would like to get Maine and would like to get Vermont. And then next year it's Midwest, West Coast.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We gotta get our street cred up, right? We got these West Coast guys out there, like, how old are you? 17? All East Coast? I'm like, well, Louisiana. Like, I don't know, you know. Yeah, all East Coast. But
I was supposed to be at Mount Hood a couple of months ago, but didn't work out. So
we got a good plan. We left Maine and Vermont pretty easy to pick away when we needed it. And then we're going to group up Indiana and Ohio and Kentucky, right?
Good.
And we're going to kind of do those 3, and then we might go North Dakota, South Dakota, and go right down the line next year. We got a couple good plans. We might have to.
We do plan things around football and basketball season a little bit.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So maybe the Ohio, maybe the Midwest ones.
Maybe when Alabama.
Well, now Charles Mound in Illinois, you're going to have to plan that one carefully because of the dates that it's open. So, But the Highpointers Foundation does a good job at coordinating those dates.
Yes.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Those are
shout out to Dave Colville and to Robin and to the foundation, because, you know, they obviously were very involved in the convention, and they have their board meeting and their planning for, you know, a number of initiatives to keep the High Points, you know, kind of up to snuff and you know, dealing with issues like access and all of those things. So they do a really, really good job.
Well, and then there's people who live around High Points that are not on, you know, public lands, that just go there and keep it up. And I think that there was a story in this most recent issue of Apex to Zenith about Hoosier Hill in Indiana, and a guy that goes out there and cleans it up.
Yeah. And
actually, one of my guests, he and his dad, it was Tim Jr. and Tim Sr. I forget what episode number, but they're 48 completers, or maybe 49 now, but they're from Indiana. And Tim Jr. said that he'll often go out to Hoosier Hill and just, you know, do a little clean sweep here and there. And that's awesome. They care about their home state, High Point, and they want the visitors that come to know that it's being well kept.
Yeah. And, you know, you just reminded me of something, Lauren. I read there was a Facebook post yesterday which I just thought was fascinating. And it was actually, Tommy, I think it was Mount Washington. Somebody posted that he had just done his first high point. It was Mount Washington. He's from New Jersey, which is where I'm from. And he basically was like throwing it out there to anybody who's doing any high points anywhere that he would love to go with them and join them. And
I
it
saw
just
that
struck
post.
me like,
Yeah.
did you see that post?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we should all inundate them and say, okay, let's go here this day, let's go there that day.
Completely overwhelm him. Yeah.
Yeah. But what struck me was, does he know even that there is this whole community out there, right?
Right.
Like he was posting something on Facebook, basically just throwing the line out there. Does he know there's a Highpointers Club? Does he know there's a podcast? Does he know that there's, all of these resources and interested people? So I will shoot him a note separately and let him know that if he's looking for resources and access, that all of this is out there for him. But you wonder how many other people like him are out there, and the more
exactly. And I think what you guys are doing with the club and the platform that you have, and with the social media under new control, I don't want to say control, but under the people running social media right now, I think are going to have a really beneficial reach in terms of getting out to people like that and letting them know, hey, there's a club, this is what we do.
Right.
Come join us, as cult-like as that sounds. But
Yeah.
Right. And look, there are people who have been involved. Kathy, for example, manages the website. She does a really, really, she requires input in order to make sure that we're updating things appropriately. So hopefully with this sort of new surrounding group, we'll be able to provide her with a lot more content and input and other things, which will then make the website be a lot more meaningful as well. So I think that it all works together. And, now that we, I think, have a direction toward where we want to get to, it'll continue to build pretty quickly.
that's perfect. Well, before we go, is there anything that you want the listeners to know about the upcoming issue of Apex to Zenith, if they want to get a story in, if they want to get a picture in?
Yeah, I would just say it's do it quickly if they want to get something in it, because it's rapidly moving toward layout, and we have a lot of the content now. But that being said, we do have a little bit of time in order to get things there. I guess the other thing I would say is it's an ongoing thing. Right. So if we don't get it in the next one, get it to us as soon as you can, and we'll be planning, the fall issue before we know it. Yeah. So I guess the main message would be we love seeing everything that you've got. So don't hesitate to send us an update. We will answer you. We will answer you as quickly as we possibly can. But we love to see what you're doing.
Good.
Yeah, we want to get to the point where we're leaving stuff out, right? Not looking to get stuff in, and then roll it over to the next, right? As far as content. So it's all fair game, and then we'll mold it into something,
Yeah.
Something beautiful. So okay.
Well, that's perfect. Thanks for being here and sharing your stories. You've always got stories, whether, even if you guys didn't do any high points or go to a convention, there's always something going on between Tom and Tommy in your lives. And I love hearing about it. So.
Cool.
and thanks for what you do for the club and the Highpointers community, and obviously with the issue. And for the listeners who are not Highpointers Club members, you can join by going to highpointers.org, and joining the Highpointers Club is how you get these issues of Apex to Zenith Magazine.
Awesome.
So thanks again for being here. This is fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lauren. Great to see you.
Take care.